You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with professional triathlete Timothy O'Donnell. He's primarily a long-course Ironman racer who has had a lot of recent success at the Ironman World Championships in Kona. He shares that experience with us as well as others. I hope you enjoy. Timothy, Happy New Year and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Why don't we start off with walking us through your history and how you got into triathlons and the catalyst for you to turn pro and focus on long-course Ironman racing?
Well, for me, my triathlon career really started in the pool at a young age. I'm the youngest of four, and we all swam growing up. And then I continued swimming as I went on to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and that's where really my transition from swimming to triathlon started to really take shape. My older brother Thomas was the captain of the club tri team at the academy, and convinced me to. He didn't really convince me; he forced me to try out for the tri team. So I did that, and made the team. It was still pretty low on my radar those first 2 years at the academy. I was swimming basically all year round, and wasn't taking tri seriously. And then the end of my sophomore year, I raced collegiate nationals and did okay, and decided to just make the switch and get full into triathlon.
Did you find it challenging to go from being a swimmer into being that multisport athlete in terms of the running and the cycling? How was that in terms of the learning curve?
It was a mixed bag. I think the cycling in terms of, becoming a better cyclist developed fairly quickly. I think when you're a swimmer, you have a pretty big cardiovascular engine. And I was a distance swimmer, so I was ready to kind of tackle that work. My bike handling skills weren't the best at the beginning. And then running for me was definitely a challenge. I never did much running. And I remember my first triathlons just hating the run, absolutely hating it. And that's something I really had to work on. I really had to focus on for several years, particularly when I was at the Olympic Training Center, to really try to become a runner and get out of that mindset of being a swimmer. I see a lot of swimmers come into the sport, and they can't let go of the fact that they were a swimmer, and they still identify with that. And for me, it wasn't like that. I knew that if I wanted to be successful in triathlon, I had to consider myself a triathlete and think like a swimmer, a biker, and a runner.
Right. And in terms of the running piece, I mean, most people who start off in triathlons find running off the bike quite challenging. I mean, what would your recommendation be? How did you approach it? Was it just a matter of time and getting that used to it and strengthening and that kind of thing? Or was there anything specific that made you a stronger runner off the bike that you would recommend for someone who's just starting out?
Well, I mean, in one way, it's a little easier because if you're not a runner, you don't have any expectations. You never have your running times to compare yourself to, and you don't have to deal with that transition. For me, I learned how to run off the bike, so I never really had that kind of, oh man, I'm running so slow, or this is so much harder than regular running or whatnot. So, but in my early days of ITU racing, I was on a professional, ITU team called Team Aegis, and Vic Plata, who was one of our Olympians in 2004, I believe, was kind of the head of the team. And he urged me to do every one of my, every run, basically do off the bike, even your long run. If it meant, ride an hour before your long run, just always running off the bike to get that muscle memory down. So I did that for a little while. And I think that did kind of help just get that feel for running off the bike.
Right. So some frequency would be a key theme I've heard from a lot of people who are strong runners off the bike, is really incorporating that into a lot of the workouts. And so what was the catalyst for you to say, okay, I like this sport, succeeding at it to a certain degree, I want to make this a profession? I mean, what was that step that you made that really turned it into kind of your life's calling, I would say?
That was a little muddled for me because I didn't necessarily know if I was good enough to be a professional or definitely make a career of it. I never saw that coming, but I knew that I loved the sport, and I knew that I wanted to figure out how to do more of it. And when I was at the academy, this is kind of when that was all, I guess that tri bug was really biting me, and I really felt that I had something special to give, and I wanted keep pursuing this sport. And I ended up going to grad school and was able to keep racing there, and then get put into the world-class athlete program when I was in the Navy. So that was all kind of my, I guess, early years of turning into a pro. And I actually didn't want to get my pro card, but Libby Burrell, who was head of the USAT kind of high performance program, wanted me to race under 23, I think one of the under 23 IT races, where I was just going to go as an age grouper and do the drafting race. And she's like, yeah, you got time to step up. So I kind of just jumped in and with the IT racing and got on that path.
Cool. And then in terms of now ramping up to half Ironman and ultimately Ironman distance races, I mean, was that a natural progression for you? You felt comfortable at the longer distance races, or?
Yeah, I think I always knew my calling in the sport would be long distance racing, and I just had a feeling that that's what I was built for. And I think that's where my strengths lie. I never had really the leg speed that would have made me a gold medalist at the Olympics, that's for sure. I think my running did get a lot better, and I put myself in a competitive position among the U.S. men in 09 and 10 in terms of IT racing. But yeah, I knew, I think deep in my heart, that the long courses where I wanted to go, but I also knew that I had to grow as an athlete, and I think I did that in the ITU. And I worked on my run, became a better runner, and from there, he gave me the time to kind of build up over the years, slowly in terms of training volume and things like that to get to the point where I could be a successful long course racer.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a mistake I've made in my amateur career, is jumping up to the Ironman distance so quickly. And I think having that base and going slow is definitely the smart move. And
I think it keeps you in the sport longer too. I mean, I read an article that it seems, I think a majority of Ironman racers now are kind of one and done with Ironmans, and they come into the sport and maybe don't progress the way they should to really, maybe fall in love with it, or just enjoy it a little bit more and not get too burnt out on trying to do an Ironman off of coming off the couch.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's really sound advice. So with that said, why don't we talk about a few of your race highlights and some interesting races that you've done? One that kind of sticks out for me for kind of different reasons, and I'll explain for a second, is St Croix. So you've gone there a number of times, you've won there a number of times, and I believe you also met your wife there, which is makes it probably a special place for you. For me, I actually went there for a swim race a couple years ago, not related to the St Croix 70.3, but I got to see the island, and it looks really rugged. There's that famous hill called the Beast. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that course, and what makes that a legendary race, and a race that everyone says is so challenging.
Yeah, that's got a special place in my heart too, that race. And not just because of everything that's happened there for me, but it's just a really great old school race. And I'm bummed that it's no longer a professional race. That's something that hopefully one day it'll have a resurgence and get the pro field back there. But it's really a combination of the elements, kind of like Hawaii and Kona. It's a combination of the elements and the actual course. I mean, that bike course is really, really hard. And it's not just the Beast. Beast is just one part of it. It's getting over the Beast, and the back half of the course, it's just nonstop kind of rolling up and down in the heat and humidity. And that's what really just kind of starts to drive the nail into the coffin for most people. So that race is not over when you get on top of the Beast, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so for those not familiar with the Beast, I mean, what is it? I mean, it's obviously a hill, but how long and steep is it? Do you know like what the stats are? What makes it? I mean, that's the thing everyone talks about. I've actually never seen it, but
yeah, I think it maxes out around 20% for one section, and it's only 600 or 800 meters. It's definitely, I would always make sure I had the right gearing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not that long of a hill, actually. It's the first year I did it, I mean, it hurts for sure, but I thought it was going to be just, a much bigger hill. But it's really the damage that it causes on the back half of the bike, I think, that has made it legendary.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So another race I wanted to briefly touch on was Ironman Brazil. I think there's a common theme I'm seeing here, which is you do really well in kind of tropical, hot environments, Kona, St Croix, Brazil. But that one, you've won there. You had your fastest Ironman there. Talk about that race a little bit. Why is that one where you've had a lot of success, and what makes that one special?
Yeah, for some reason I always wanted to do that race, and I finally got to do it a few years ago. I think 2013 I did it the first time, and what's awesome about that race is the people. Just the Brazilian tri community is just so enthusiastic and energetic and embracing. And I don't speak Portuguese, and it wasn't a problem. They brought me in with open arms, and always excited to have me there. I think it's because I don't know, maybe I look a little Brazilian with my big eyebrows, but I fit right in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never raced there, but I went down there on a vacation one time and had a blast, and it's a pretty amazing place. So speaking of vacations, I actually just got back from the Big Island. So I was there on a biking trip. I was there for about 10 days or so, but we circumnavigated the island and got to see the Ironman course, but also a bunch of other things. And that's an amazing island. It's absolutely spectacular. So, you've had a lot of success in recent years at the World Championship there, and including a podium and just amazing performances. And so maybe just for, those who aren't familiar with it, I mean, what makes that, the World Championship other than the tradition? Why is it so challenging? I mean, it's got the best field in the world, but talk a little bit about the conditions there, because I think it really is an interesting aspect of it that people don't realize.
Yeah, I'd say Hawaii, every year seems to have its own personality there. That's for sure. You can't really expect the same exact thing. 2015, it was so hot, and no cloud cover, no breeze on the run. And it was one of the hottest years I can remember since, going to watch Rennie in 2009. But it's, the elements, the wind, obviously the wind on the bike and the heat and humidity that kind of just creeps up on you are all, I think, pretty important. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that it's a world championship, and a lot of, when you put so much weight on one day in one race, a lot of things can go wrong. And I think it just, most I think racers take themselves out of the race before, the gun goes off, either with, not training, overtraining leading into the race, or, not being able to control their nerves, or doing too much race week. So really, I think it's those type of factors that really decide who's going to conquer that race on that given day.
Right. And so you talked about 2015, which was the year you actually podiumed there, and you said it's one of the hottest years. So you obviously succeed in heat. And so what's your secret there? I mean, is it just a matter of mental strength and pushing through it, or do you train a lot in heat, or how do you go about that? Because that's a condition that a lot of people just sort of break down in and can't handle.
I think it's mostly a mental state, to be able to kind of put yourself through that. And I also think some bodies are just designed, I work with Mark Allen, and he said he always raced really well in the heat too, and cold races he never really did that well. And you look at my track record last year with getting hit with some really cold races like Frankfurt and St. George. They didn't go as I had hoped, that's for sure. So, some of it might just be physiological, but we train in Noosa, Australia, which is hot and humid for a couple months early in the year, and I think that helps. But in all honesty, I'm coming from Boulder, so it's not super hot when the end of September when I leave to go to Kona. Yeah. But, I like to come down from altitude. But yeah, I think it's just really being able to put yourself, in that mental state and forget about time, and those hot, really hard races. The stopwatch goes out the door, out the window. It doesn't matter. It's a survival race, and who can be smart during the race and tough it out.
Right. And do you really, at least this is the perception we're given from amateurs' point of view, but do you really sort of, from a mental perspective, box it in to say, okay, I've got to have my race. I'm not going to pay attention to what others are doing, and I just need to kind of do my thing and see where the cards land, or is that more of a myth? I mean, it's kind of hard not to pay attention to the other racers in a race, especially a world championship, but how do you go about that?
For me, the bike is very dynamic, and I think with the men's race right now, with such a large group of guys starting the bike in Kona, it isn't an individual race for me at that point. When I hit the run, I try to make it a little bit more like that, and I think it eventually kind of goes that way, just because at that point it's what do you have in your body? I mean,
Yeah.
At a certain point in the marathon, it's hard to, I don't know, really will yourself. You have to, in terms of other guys and playing a poker game. But yeah, I think it's, the run definitely gets more individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one last question on Kona. Is there any key thing you would highlight that isn't captured in the TV broadcast that most people get to watch and that's their experience? I think it's an hour, maybe two max. So there's a lot of the race that isn't captured. Is there anything that kind of always sticks out to you being, I wish they would cover this, or there's an aspect of it that just isn't, it's not going to translate to TV? Is there anything you would highlight?
Well, I think there's a lot of dynamics in the professional race that don't get shown. The formula seems to be kind of, all right, a camera on the lead man, camera on the lead female, and they kind of piece together with that. But I mean, there's a lot of just interactions with the athletes that I think that could be maybe captured a little bit better. That's a lot of hours of film they're trying to put together for 50 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever they have to put it in.
Yeah, I'll admit that I sat in my living room on the live feed and watched all, 8 to 10 hours because I was also watching some friends. So I sat there and watched the whole thing. And I must admit that there's so much that's missed just from, like you said, the strategy on the bike and obviously the run and stuff. So I really enjoyed it. So, but I'm kind of on the extreme end of fan interest. So, it's obviously a passion.
It's interesting. The more people that don't know anything about the sport that you talk to them about it, they become very interested. So, I think it's, something, our community has to do a little bit better, about trying to bring in a new audience. Like our strength coach, Erin Carson here at Rally Sport in Boulder, she'll tell her other clients all about triathlon. They have no clue about triathlon, tells them all about it. And all of a sudden, they're all, checking in online and, following the sport and really getting into it. So I think it's kind of cool to see that it does have that impact, when we can educate other people about triathlon.
Yeah, absolutely. And the World Championship has the broadest touch. And that's sort of what got me into the sport is I grew up and watched that thing every single year. And I was like, that's incredible. And then when I realized that, hey, maybe I can do something like that one day, that sort of got my foot in the water. And then I took up swimming in my early 30s, which is a very late time to do it. And I wish I was started as young as you, but it's been great. So in terms of training, you mentioned you train with Mark Allen. And I know one of the things that he was known for was using heart rate as a metric to kind of make sure you're not overtraining and that type of thing. Is that something that he still incorporates in his coaching and something you buy into a lot?
Absolutely, and I think particularly for Ironman racing, that's when it really becomes important. And I think it's been a big big factor for my success the last 2 years in Kona. It's been the work I've done, that high-end aerobic heart rate training I've done with Mark, particularly on the bike. I mean, I've ridden the last 2 years on a different level than I have in years past, and that's just, I think, because of that training. And I was lucky enough to get to chat with Phil Maffetone a few days ago too. So it's pretty great to have these resources, and on my team and willing to try to help me get to where I need to be to win that race.
Right. So in terms of advice for people that are coming off the off season and starting to ramp things up in the new year, I know from a professional perspective, you have the coaching and a ton of experience, but there are a lot of people who listen to this who don't have as much experience and kind of want to go gung-ho 100% right from the start of January because they've got their big race in, I don't know, May, June, July, whatever. I mean, what advice would you have for them in terms of how to approach the early stages of a season and not to overtrain, not to set yourself up for injury?
Yeah, I think especially for racing late in the season, January, February are where you need to be smart and not overdo it. And Rinny and I we're probably a little more relaxed with our off season than most professionals. And I think it's, most importantly, it helps, make a long career when you're not trying to just stress your body all year round. And to be in peak shape, you can't hold that for 365 days. You just have to let your body recover, come back to the state it wants to be in, and absorb everything you've done. So I think being smart, ramping up slowly, getting a good strength program, especially early in the season, getting your mobility and stability, getting all that stuff working, and then getting some good, heavy weights early in the year will really help injury prevention as you start to ramp up your training volume.
Right. I think that's really good advice. I actually, this off season, for the first time, I've really focused on strength and mobility and balance and all that kind of stuff. The last few seasons before that, I was just hammering on the CompuTrainer, and I paid the price because I was so overtrained that. So I'm getting smarter, I guess. But it's not that's really, really good advice, which is focus on those foundational elements in the off season as you get ramped up. So makes sense.
That's a great point about the kind of the trainers, and it's easy to get fit when you're riding indoors. It doesn't take as much time, it is more efficient. So you do, yeah, it's almost like you have to hold yourself back a little bit when if you're in a cold climate winter.
Yeah. Yeah. I got too caught up on wattage and just kept hammering and then I had issues all year with my knees, but this year has been a lot better. I've held back and I was smarter about it. So I feel more confident going into the season. So speaking of this season, I mean, how is your planning going? I mean, do you know yet what races you're going to do, or how do you go about thinking about that? And
the schedule's still a little bit a work in progress. Obviously, Kona is the goal for the year, but I'm actually heading to Dubai at the end of the month to do the 70.3 out there, and that for me is really just more of a shock to the system type of day than, trying to go out there and break the course record type of day. Like I said, Rennie and I take our off season seriously, and we're pretty lax. So, my training really started, Christmas, New Year's, around there. I started to get back into a routine. So it'll, something Mark likes to do, he used to do years ago in Pukan, do about 3 weeks of training, shock the body with the race, and then really start to get into, the meat of the winter training. And Rennie and I will do that out in Noosa. So we'll head to Noosa, Australia for February, March, and then come back here and do some racing. I'm hoping to maybe go back to Ironman Brazil. We'll see. Some other options I'm thinking about are either, Ironman Cairns or Boulder or possibly Austria. But somewhere in that late May to early July window is kind of where I want to get that other Ironman in.
Right. Cool. And so speaking of Rennie, how much training do you all do together versus separate? Obviously you have different coaches and you're professional. So you obviously need to do what you need to do. But I'm just curious because my wife and I both are amateur triathletes and we get to train together sometimes and stuff, but I just curious to find out how you manage that. And obviously different strengths and weaknesses and things. How do you go about that?
I think we, we'll do a lot of our easy runs or bikes together if they coincide with the schedule. And her coach Siri is in Boulder, so I've had the good fortune of swimming with Siri's squad. So we'll head to the pool together and do some of those sessions. But yeah, since I started working with Mark and I'm focusing more on my heart rate, she doesn't actually like to ride with me as much because I usually have an agenda with my heart rate that she doesn't want to get caught up in. So. It's been a little bit more separate, but yeah, we're very when it comes to our training, pretty separate other than that easy stuff. We love to go on, if we have a double run or an evening jog, things like that. But other than that, we're both pretty specific with our quality work individually.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So we're almost out of time here, so I guess I'll ask one final question. And usually I ask people what their all-time favorite race venue or location is. I think we've covered a few of them, but if you have any other ones you want to highlight, that'd be great. But I was going to also ask you, what your favorite workout session is. So sort of, what is that one session, or obviously it's going to be modified throughout the season, but is it the, long bike with a brick? Is it, a long swim, obviously with your swimming background? What is that one kind of workout that you really look forward to?
Well, just quickly, other race locations. Phuket, Thailand is awesome. That's one of my favorite races. And that's another, surprise, hot, humid, hilly kind of race, but just a really fun spot. But in terms of that favorite workout, If days off don't count, my favorite workout would be probably some of the hilly runs I've learned from Mark. There's this one like 9-mile hilly run, kind of it's called the Hog's Back. It's right on the kind of the foothills of Boulder, and it's a run I do a couple times a year, just really hard. It's just like, all right, just work the hills hard, get that heart rate up, and it's just a really beautiful loop that it's awesome. I've been in Boulder since 2009, and every year I somehow find like a new trail or a new riding route. So it's unbelievable the variety we have here.
Cool. And do you do a lot of trail running to kind of loosen the impact on your training, or on the road a lot? How do you think about that?
I do a mix. I like the treadmill too, actually. So I'll probably be on there once or twice a week. But yeah, all three. And really, I mean, we have a beautiful trail network right out from our front door. So I do it just more because I love running on trails and worrying about impact. But I make sure to get several of my long runs on pavement before Kona, just to kind of toughen up my legs, I guess. And that's what Mark really loves the downhill running for. When I do those hill sessions, just that loading on your quads really helps that back half of the marathon.
I'm supremely jealous of the fact you have a trail system right outside your door. I do too, except it's called Central Park. I'm in New York City. So there are nice trails there. They're just the same ones over and over again. So
right.
Anyway, Timothy, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And best of luck in 2017.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.